From the Daily Reporter, this is Ethan Duran. Welcome to Brews and Blueprints, a podcast about construction and development across Wisconsin. I'm Ethan Duran with the Daily Reporter, and this is the Brews and Blueprints Podcast. I'm with David Polk, Director of the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development's Bureau of Apprenticeship Standards. David has more than 20 years of experience leading apprenticeship programs in the public, private, and academic sectors, starting as a plumber's apprentice himself. We'll meet David and learn a little more about what he does in this episode. David, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Can you tell me a little bit about your educational and professional background before you found your role at DWD?
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to a trade and technical high school. I'm a third generation plumber. So for me, going to a trade and technical high school and then starting my apprenticeship, my plumbing apprenticeship right after high school was a bit rudimentary for my family. It was celebrated when I said I was going to start my apprenticeship right after high school. Um, so I spent 10 years in the field, and through that apprenticeship and then working in the field. And then I went into the city of Milwaukee and became a plumbing inspector. So I went from working in the field to inspecting other plumbers' work in the city of Milwaukee. So that was a bit of a pivot in my career, but it also started my career in public service. Um, that said, during my time at the city of Milwaukee, that gave me the opportunity to go back to school. So I went back to school and actually got my bachelor's degree. So I'm a huge proponent of lifetime learning from anyone, from our apprentices all the way up through any academic sector or any post-secondary sector. Um, but getting my bachelor's degree allowed me to then become the Milwaukee Area Technical College's Associate Dean of Apprenticeship and Trade. I spent just about 5 years there leading Milwaukee and a couple of the surrounding counties apprenticeship programming for MATC. And then I found my way to state government, and actually, on the day that we're recording this podcast, it's officially 3 years in this role as director of apprenticeship for the state of Wisconsin.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you for that.
You mentioned that third generation plumber. Plumbing in your family was a bit rudimentary to start out with. What got you interested in working as becoming director of Bureau for Apprenticeship Standards, and that surprised your family? Did you have public service in your family before that?
No, it was a bit of a surprise for me to take the role at the state. But when you go back to my beginnings, I'm a huge proponent of access to occupations at a very young age. Me being a third generation plumber, I from probably 10 years old up, I spent time at my grandfather's shop, and in the summers, riding with my dad and grandfather in the truck and actually going on job sites with them. I was exposed to plumbing and construction sites and remodels very, very young. And I think that helped to build my long-term success, but also a long-term passion and accessibility for very young people to start to survey what they may want to do when it comes to work very early on. So I'm a huge proponent of that. And that background of access very, very young helped to play into my how I wanted to build my career. So when I was at MATC, I helped to build pathways. My passion was building pathways of access to different occupations. So we did a lot of work with bringing young people on campus in the summer so they can survey our labs and maybe having a moment of experiential learning in what the college had to offer. And that has also uh, kind of espoused itself in my career as director, as we've expanded youth apprenticeship overarchingly for the past 3 years, which affords young people access to occupations very, very early on, um, which in turn has driven down the average age of apprentice in the state of Wisconsin, because now we have a lot of young people that are moving directly from youth apprenticeship into registered apprenticeship. So my personal experience has helped to shape that desire for pathway building for very young people to access occupations very early on. Uh, it happens to be via the apprenticeship model uh, in my current role.
Um, is starting out this early for apprenticeships, expanding youth apprenticeships, and you mentioned the average age is a little lower now. Is that unique to Wisconsin or are other states doing similar right now?
Other states are doing similar. Wisconsin has had a bit of a head start when it comes to youth apprenticeship, and we're starting to see other states try to duplicate what we've been doing since 1991. Um, so it is a bit of a trend, and I think it's a perfect storm of the workforce challenges that are happening not only in Wisconsin but nationwide, where companies are just having a harder time to find talent, and now they've pivoted to investing in training younger and younger individuals to come up within their company's workforce. So it is a bit of the perfect storm, but Wisconsin has had a jump start by leaps and bounds when it comes to procuring a youth apprenticeship model where young people can actively participate, and companies have access for recruitment and training of these young people to try to keep them in their doors and move them up their own company ladder, so to speak.
That's great. I definitely want to get more into this expansion of apprenticeship and bringing more young people in and why that's important. But I want to take this a little bit back and just kind of look at apprenticeship from a bit of a higher level. Um, you know, uh, you are helping set the standards for apprenticeship in Wisconsin. Can you tell me a little bit about, I guess, your department and its history and what the responsibilities are?
Yeah, absolutely. So Wisconsin was the very first state to ever have apprenticeship laws on the book. So we're a state apprenticeship agency, or more affectionately known as a SAA. We're the first SAA in the country. Those laws came about back in 1911. It also helped to the same laws helped to also shape our Wisconsin Technical College system, which laws were made for that system at the same time in service of the apprenticeship model and other technical career paths. So our apprenticeship laws preceded federal apprenticeship laws by 25 years. And when their laws first came on the books back in 1936, the federal laws, it looked a lot like the laws that Wisconsin had already been practicing for 25 years. So in the department, we help to procure, monitor, and register apprenticeship programming in the state of Wisconsin. And what that means is, there's apprenticeship laws on the book, and there's also an administrative laws that help to interpret those laws legislatively. We help to shape the minimum standards and ensure that minimum standards are being met when a company goes through the apprenticeship process. And again, that execution is based on the legislative laws and then the administrative code that my department is able to procure.
I also want to bring this back to some of the recent news with Department of Workforce Development, hitting record numbers not seen for, I think, the past 20 years. Do you want to tell me a little more about that?
Yeah, we're very excited because, the past 3 years, we've seen record participation in our system. And a little tidbit, the record previous that we had overtaken was back in 2001. That was the previous record with about 15,700 apprentices participating in the system during that time. That was the year I completed my apprenticeship. So I was part of the previous record. So it is a bit of a heartfelt moment or serendipity that I am the director while we broke that previous record. So we had overtaken that record 3 years ago by going to 15,900. Last year we were over 16,000. Well, not last year, 2023, we were over 16,000. 2024, we went over 17,000 participants in our system. Um, and that's just registered apprenticeship for the calendar year. So we're really excited that apprenticeship is being front and center as a workforce strategy. Not only more companies participating in the registered apprenticeship system, but companies are participating at a higher level in the registered apprenticeship system. So we are very, very excited that Wisconsin companies are seeing this as a workforce strategy, and embracing the registered apprenticeship system to the tune of record breaking proportions.
How did the department get more companies interested in being participants?
Yeah, so we were able to procure some federal grants, which not only helped us to market, but also put more boots on the ground as far as engaging with companies and spreading the good word of apprenticeship. It also helped us to invest in our youth apprenticeship system, and we also did a really strategic effort to help to educate those youth apprenticeship stakeholders on the registered apprenticeship possibilities. And the fruit from that was not only record participation in youth apprenticeship, but also record bridging from youth apprenticeship to registered apprenticeship. We also saw a record number of companies participating in the registered apprenticeship system. So I think it's an overarching strategy of marketing, spreading the good word, coming into those specific industries that just have a fervent need for a new strategy on finding talent and training talent, using youth apprenticeship to also market the registered apprenticeship system, and then purporting out to the public a full blown apprenticeship ecosystem. You can use youth apprenticeship to recruit and train young people. You can use certified pre-apprenticeship as a pathway into your specific registered apprenticeship program and find that model as a recruitment model. And then registered apprenticeship helps to not only recruit, but it has a higher retention rate than any post-secondary education training model. So when you have a full ecosystem for a workforce in Wisconsin that is in dire need of talent, it it creates the perfect storm for the utilization of a model that's well over 100 years old.
Let's go back to talking a little bit about youth apprenticeship specifically. And I think you sort of explained it in your own way, because this is also part of your life experience growing up and seeing job sites and construction at an early age. But, why is it important to um, start early in life for students? Why is it important to get younger and younger people interested in the trades and apprenticeship?
Yeah. So for me, seeing those construction sites and going in remodels and things of that nature at a very young age gave me specific context on what I want to do. And I always tell young people m- part of part of maybe the most important decision also that may come from a very young workforce experience is knowing what you don't want to do very, very early on and starting a track very early for what you do want to do. For those students that are lucky enough to go through an experience and they find out that experience is something that they want to do long term, they can start to make that travel toward that occupation very early on. The fruit that that brings is you have a very young person that starts very early on. They tend to stay within the ecosystem of that occupation longer, right? And that's what those employers and those that procure those occupations, that's what you want. So I'll use myself as an example. I went through, being on the truck with my grandfather and my dad, to going to technical high school where I took plumbing, to going to becoming a plumbing apprentice. My career in plumbing, in the ecosystem of plumbing, had never left, because I moved from a plumbing apprentice to a licensed plumber to a plumbing inspector to a procurer of apprenticeship programs, including plumbing, to the state director of apprenticeship programs, including plumbing. So my traversing through my own workforce background has spanned in an ecosystem that started off very, very young. So I'll use our healthcare pathways. You may have someone that becomes a healthcare youth apprentice and becomes a medical assistant youth registered apprentice and becomes a RN and goes on to get their doctorate and becomes a workforce strategist for a hospital network. They're still within that ecosystem, but they started off very, very young, and now their workforce life has traversed all of the parts of that particular ecosystem. That's the important part of starting off really, really young, and that's where companies and organizations can take advantage of bringing in someone very young and helping to procure that individual and investing in them so that they climb the career ladder and stay within that ecosystem for a very, very long time.
Speaking of starting young, I understand Wisconsin has some new roles to the youth apprenticeship tool belt, fire protection and project management. I'm sure project management might extend a little beyond construction, but I know it's a huge role for many contractors. What's the process like of developing a youth apprenticeship program such as these?
Yeah, so for all of our youth apprenticeship programs, we look to occupational experience. We want those employers to actually come in and help to give us guidance on what the competencies should be for that particular youth apprenticeship, right? And it's two pronged when we do that. We want the youth apprentice to have a very specific experience with that employer. For the employer, we also want you to give the ability to give a very specific, intuitive experience to that young person, because it sets them up for them to stay within that occupational pathway, right? So we don't want a youth apprentice that is sweeping floors and cleaning bathrooms as a manufacturing uh, youth apprenticeship. We want that experience to be very specific to manufacturing, very specific to fire protection, uh, very specific to all of our pathways, so that you're building competencies at that appropriate 16 to 18-year-old level, and they're making a very conscious decision on if they would like to extend their experience in this occupational pathway. While at the same time, the employer is providing this very specific apprentice experience, so that now they have an 18-year-old that has graduated high school that has experience in this occupational pathway. So it's giving the two pronged choice. You can recruit uh, a 18 to 19-year-old that has just decided without any experience that they want to go into a fire protection pathway, or you can recruit 18 to 19-year-old that has graduated high school that had 2 years experience already within this specific pathway. Probably 9 times out of 10, 9.9 times out of 10, that organization is gonna pick that one that has already had 2 years experience. It puts them on a fervent pathway to stay within that occupational pathway with experience, and that's what we wanna provide young people across the state.
I know this is a construction podcast, but I think you mentioned, was it sort of non-traditional roles that are coming into the apprenticeship focus? Do you want to talk a little more about what some of the new apprenticeships are and what they entail?
Absolutely, yeah. So we're spanning, healthcare. We have a HR specialist registered apprenticeship. We've made investments in early childhood education, which helps to affect the workforce system overall. Because now, probably more than ever, folks need dependable childcare. So we have our early childhood educator apprenticeship to help train that workforce, so, you have qualified, trained individuals that can care for your young people while you then go to work. So we're kind of spanning the gambit. Last year, you might have saw that we are piloting our teacher apprenticeship here in Wisconsin. And one of the things that we want to do for our new sponsors and new employers to apprenticeship, and also our employers that have been with us for a very long time, we want you to utilize the expansion of registered apprenticeship. If you're a construction firm that has a robust HR staff and you're finding a hard time finding talent for your HR department, you may want to look at an HR specialist apprenticeship and start to train up your own staff within that department, along with what you do for your construction trade apprentices. So we want to expand the utilization of our system, not only in certified pre-apprenticeship and youth apprenticeship, but we have the ability as a state apprenticeship agency to build out most any apprenticeship that can fall in line within the minimum standards of our state. And that's what we would love to do for all of our stakeholders, whether they're new to our system or an age old rudimentary stakeholder of ours.
When I talk to contractors, workforce development specialists, experts in the industry in general, there is a big shift going on to moving to not, I guess they would call them non-traditional populations when building the workforce. Um, Women in construction, people of color, people from low to moderate incomes. The Hispanic populations are becoming a bigger part of the workforce, and that's expected to continue the trend upward throughout the years. Um, why? I guess two questions is, why is it important to start reaching out to new populations, new demographics, and how do you make sure when you're developing apprenticeship programs and recruiting and working with companies, how do you help focus on bringing those new demographics in?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So I'll give you a little background that has some context. My grandfather was the first union plumbing apprentice to complete in the state of Wisconsin ever. So as we start to expand and grow, and especially where we're at now with our workforce, with everyone having a hard time finding talent, I don't think that there's a firm that can be exclusive to any one population anymore. I think every if companies are not finding a strategic approach to reach to all populations, you're going to be left behind because talent is so hard to find. So for us, what we want to do is ensure that there's access to those preemptive systems, our youth apprenticeship systems, and our certified pre-apprenticeship systems, so we can point employers in a very specific direction. So we can say, hey, we have this certified pre-apprenticeship program that works with this particular community. We can put you in touch with them so that you can start recruiting their participants. So that's how we try to merge our ecosystem to provide access, because we know the participants in all of our ecosystems. We can point these companies in the right directions when they're saying, "Hey, we're having a hard time reaching out to this community, or we're having a hard time overall." We can say, "Hey, have you talked to this organization? They have a great training model to help bring people up to minimum standards so that they can apply for apprenticeship with companies like yours. We can put you in touch." The other part is working with not only our CBO partners, but also our technical college partners, because they have great talent that are coming through their doors. And us as a state agency, we try to procure those relationships so they can provide that outreach and recruitment to all populations, all corners of the state. That's how we try to merge and point employers in the right direction when they're having a tough time finding talent. The other thing that we do is we're helping out with the DOC in the reentry population. They have certified pre-apprenticeship programs too. So we have a very specific staff that works with the DOC to try to mend that gap of when individuals are coming back home after being justice involved, and pointing them in the right direction that is in alignment with some of the training that they might have had prior to release. That's another population that companies have to start participating with if they're having a hard time finding talent.
David, I wanted to ask, if was there anything else we didn't get a chance to cover while we're on the while we're recording here?
Well, yeah, we're gonna continue to expand registered apprenticeship, youth apprenticeship, and certified pre-apprenticeship. I want all of the firms that have the ability to listen to this podcast to reach out to us, whether you're having concerns with your recruitment or not. We have a very, very robust Wisconsin apprenticeship ecosystem now that has expanded over the past few years. If you have participated in our system before, we may have something new for you. We can help you with your recruitment, and we can build. We have the ability to build brand new apprenticeships off the shelf to help you with your workforce needs. So all of the firms that are able to listen to this podcast, reach out to us, get involved. We undoubtedly have something for you as we continue to expand the Wisconsin apprenticeship ecosystem.
How should folks reach out if they want to get in touch?
Absolutely. So you can go to wisconsinapprenticeship.org. That's our website. We're constantly updating, or just email us at apprenticeship@dwd.wisconsin.gov. That's our general mailbox. Staff will reach out within 24 hours to set up a meeting or answer your questions.
All right. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.